All right, guys, so I got a ton of updates on Israel and Gaza that I want to get to in this video. We're going to start off with Omar Baddar over on CNN, breaking down what exactly this ceasefire means in the context of a 2-year-long genocidal assault on Gaza, whether or not Israel is even going to abide by this deal or try to sabotage it as we move into the further stages down the line, as well as what would actually need to happen in terms of a genuine long-term peace on addressing the underlying decades-long apartheid and occupation. And then we also have some updates as Donald Trump visited Israel to speak in front of the Israeli Knesset and was lavishing praise on Benjamin Netanyahu as well as Miriam Adelson, where he kind of said the quiet part out loud in terms of the pro-Israel corrupt influence over himself and American politics broadly. He also traveled to Egypt, where he officially signed this deal. And then we also have some updates on the hostage exchange that's been going on over the last day or so, as well as some sort of buzzer beater war crimes that were committed by the IDF as they were withdrawing from their initial positions back to the line that they're currently at right now as a part of phase 1 of this deal. So a whole bunch. Stick with me. It's going to be a long video, but let's go ahead and jump into Omar Baddar over on CNN, breaking down and contextualizing what this deal actually means.
2 years of, frankly, a genocidal war that has completely devastated the Gaza Strip. I mean, this onslaught has broken so many records in terms of the number of journalists who've been killed, the number of medics, the number of UN workers, and even the sheer number of children who have been dismembered or lost their lives in it. So any end to that is certainly welcome, and you can see it in the joy that we have seen in the images coming out of Gaza. Unfortunately, there are many unanswered questions in terms of the long term, though. There is an unanswered question about whether this is going to be a real end to that violence, because Netanyahu, who, by the way, is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, has a history of breaking ceasefires. We're witnessing that in Lebanon right now, where there's a one-sided ceasefire, where there are literally thousands of Israeli violations of that ceasefire ongoing in Lebanon. So is Gaza potentially going to go back to that kind of model where there's low-intensity warfare against Gaza instead of large-scale? And the other question is whether Gaza is going to be allowed to be rebuilt. Israel systematically destroyed Gaza as part of an effort to push the Palestinian population out. Gaza currently in complete ruins, with 92% of housing simply dismantled and destroyed, is not really fit for human habitation.
There are a lot of concerns in Israel that they're releasing people who are only going to come back in the future and hurt them, which we've seen happen in the past.
Yeah, what we've seen, part of what happens here in this dynamic is that immediately in the aftermath of October 7th, what Israel did is essentially kidnap thousands of Palestinians off the streets in both Gaza and the West Bank. In many cases, those people are held without charge or trial. Essentially, frankly, the correct terminology from my perspective is to call them hostages, because that's what they are. You have a much smaller percentage of people who are convicted of committing crimes, but even that is complicated because the legal system in Israel, essentially Palestinians are living under military rule, and they go through military tribunals where there's a 99% conviction rate. So we don't really know who's innocent and who's actually committed a crime and who's simply guilty of resisting the occupation in ways that are legitimate under international law. But nonetheless, I don't think that this is ultimately about the people who are you releasing and what they might do. There's always going to be people on both sides who are willing to commit acts of violence, and that's always an ever-present danger. What you actually need to do is solve the political injustice underneath. As long as the dynamic is Israel insisting that their solution to the problem is to keep the boot of occupation on the necks of Palestinians, that's somehow going to guarantee security. If the past several decades have not proven to you that this does not work, I don't know what it will take. We have to try something different. That different thing is allowing Palestinians to be free in their own land. And we need external pressure on Israel to take that seriously, to recognize Palestinian humanity, and to say that any rights that Israelis are entitled to, certainly Palestinians should be entitled to as well.
So as usual, Omar Baddar doing a fantastic job. He's correct on every single point that he was just outlining there. There are definitely some unanswered questions, to say the least, in the short term in terms of where this ceasefire moves forward into the next stages, right? Obviously, the Israeli government wants both Hamas as well as any other Palestinian resistance factions to completely demilitarize, whatever that means and however that would actually be accomplished. And obviously, on the flip side of that, you have Hamas and other Palestinian militant organizations saying that they don't really have the right to forfeit or surrender Palestinian resistance to Israeli aggression or occupation or apartheid or ethnic cleansing. And so there's going to be a stalemate at some point moving forward. Whether or not that can be rectified in the short term, or whether or not Israel will use that as a justification or an opportunity to continue the genocide in full force, yet to be seen. So there's a ton of unanswered questions in terms of the immediate future. There's also the semi-longer term future in terms of what vision for Gaza does this plan actually outline? Because if you listen to the Trump administration, or you listen to the Israeli government, or even just the framework of some of the things that have been put forward by Donald Trump, it's a pretty dystopian future in the best possible case scenario that they've outlined for Palestinians, right? So it's not as if there's really a good option in the short to long term that's being put in place or given to Palestinians as a part of this deal. And then in the even longer term, on what he's referencing there, if there is never any sort of an addressing of the underlying decades-long occupation and apartheid and ethnic cleansing and now genocide of Palestinians, then you're never going to get to a long-term peace, which is exactly what Donald Trump is touting this plan as. He's saying this is a peace to end all wars, to end all conflict in the region. It will be a golden age, etc., etc. But they're not even willing to acknowledge the genocide. They're not willing to acknowledge the apartheid or the occupation or the ethnic cleansing and the expansion of the illegal settlements in the West Bank. So if you're not willing to address any of those things, how could this possibly be a long-term peace? Now, moving on here, we have Jeremy Scahill setting up some of the context and the mood surrounding Donald Trump's speech to the Israeli Knesset. He says the scene in the Knesset with Trump is like watching the inverse of a war crimes tribunal. The leaders and facilitators of the Gaza genocide are congratulating each other and applauding their crimes. And that's exactly what this looked like. We can take a little bit of a look here with a short clip of, again, Donald Trump saying that this deal is essentially going to be a golden age for Israel and a golden age for the Middle East.
And let me also convey my tremendous appreciation for all of the nations of the Arab and Muslim world that came together to press Hamas to set the hostages free and to send them home. We had a lot of help. We had a lot of help from a lot of people that you wouldn't suspect, and I want to thank them very much for that. It's an incredible triumph for Israel and the world to have all of these nations working together as partners in peace, and it's pretty unusual for you to see that, but it happened in this case. This was a very unusual point in time, a brilliant point in time. Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East. It's going to work together.
Okay, so there was Donald Trump speaking in front of the Knesset. Again, I'll show you a separate clip of him talking about Miriam Adelson and saying the quiet part out loud in terms of the corrupt influence of the pro-Israel crowd on American politics. I'll show you that here in a minute. But one quick point before we move on to the Egypt stuff is that there almost is some sort of a hopeful glimmer here in terms of this deal lasting for longer than other deals in the past couple of months have, or early on in the Trump administration, in that Donald Trump is staking his entire, whatever you want to say about it, reputation on this kind of a deal. Not only that, but he also has deep financial ties and deep financial aspirations for the future of Gaza, personally for himself, as well as he has deep financial ties with some of the Arab states who helped to put this deal together and signed off on it and pressured Hamas to accept the deal as shitty as it was presented to them. So he does have like a personal investment, both reputationally as well as financially, in making this kind of a deal work. So there could be some sort of an influence that he's attempting to put on Benjamin Netanyahu in order to abide by it, which is what would actually need to happen in order for it to be a quote-unquote success. Again, even that success is a pretty nightmare scenario for Palestinians, but in terms of, at least a temporary pause in the genocide, there could be some sort of an influence there just purely out of Donald Trump's personal vested interest. Now, again, he was also in Egypt officially signing this so-called peace agreement here. Something notable that was pointed out here by Shael Ben Ephraim, they're signing this deal in Egypt. You have the leaders of Egypt and Qatar and Turkey who are a part of this big show that they're putting on here. Notably left out of this picture is, number one, Palestinians, who essentially had no part in drafting the original framework of this alleged peace deal, right? You're doing a peace deal between Palestinians and Israelis. You don't have Palestinians a part of that deal in any way, shape, or form. And then even at this peace summit, where are the Israelis? Like, this is supposed to be, again, a peace deal between Israelis and Palestinians, and you don't even have representation from either of those people at this signing of this alleged peace deal. Now, the reason why you might not have such aggressive support from the Israeli government as a part of this deal is because I genuinely do think that they're still trying to look for some sort of a way to sabotage it, right? We've seen this before, as Omar was pointing out there, in Lebanon. We've seen this before in Gaza several times before. Their goal has not changed, right? Let's keep that in mind. Even though this agreement has been put in place for now and the hostage exchange has gone through for now, their goal has not changed. Their goal was always to do this genocide, to make Gaza uninhabitable, unlivable, in order to facilitate the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. They made no qualms about that. They didn't hide that as their eventual plan. They wanted to push the entire population first out of North Gaza and down to the south. They successfully did that with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, many of whom are returning to nothing but rubble in the north right now. But they were going to push the population to the south, concentrate them, and then eventually expel the entire population out of Gaza. That was their plan. That was their goal. And that's still their goal, right? Again, even though this deal has been put in place for now. And so we had the defense minister of Israel putting out this statement just today. He said the urgent mission to which we are all committed now is to ensure the return of all the abducted bodies home. Notice the emphasis on bodies here, not alive hostages. The remaining alive hostages have been returned back to Israel, but he says the bodies, and he says Hamas's announcement about the expected return of 4 bodies today is a failure to meet commitments. Any delay or deliberate avoidance will be considered a gross violation of the agreement and will be responded to accordingly. Now, this is why this is completely ridiculous and absurd and stupid. We knew from the beginning, when this deal, this framework was put in place, that it was going to take a little bit of time for Hamas to even hypothetically locate the bodies of all of the deceased Israeli captives. Why was it going to take that long? Well, because many of these bodies are underneath the rubble in Gaza, and it's difficult to find them, let alone to get to them and retrieve their bodies and then give them back to Israel, because Israel bombed the locations of many of their hostages. And so many of these bodies that he's referencing here are still stuck under the rubble. So we knew that it was going to take some degree of time in order to get all of these bodies to be able to give them back to Israel. 4 is the amount that they were able to do in this short of a time span here. But now you have the Israeli defense minister coming out and using this as an excuse to say, oh, Hamas is violating the deals, right? As if Hamas has any vested interest in this kind of a moment in deliberately withholding the dead bodies of Israeli captives. Like, it's completely and utterly ridiculous and absurd. Just a pure attempt here to justify some sort of an avenue to continuing the genocide. Now, we also had Donald Trump, who was asked about this on the subsequent phases of the Gaza peace deal now that the hostage exchange has been going through. And he says the first thing we're doing is getting our hostages back. After that, we'll see. But they've agreed to things, and I think it's going to move along pretty well. So he essentially, when asked whether or not Israel will resume the genocide once it gets its hostages back, he says, we'll see. But we'll see. What do you mean, we'll see? Right? Because again, now that Hamas doesn't even have the cards in their hand, if you will, of the Israeli living captives in their hands, they have no leverage left, right? So there is absolutely nothing whatsoever preventing Israel or Benjamin Netanyahu deciding on, well, now we suddenly think that Hamas is not really following through on this deal, and so we're going to continue with the genocide. Or as Omar was pointing out there, maybe it's a slightly lower level thing where they claim they're in the middle of a ceasefire and then continue to bomb at a lower scale than they were before, but where it's just sort of a perpetual, in the Israeli terms, mowing the lawn of Gaza moving forward. And so, again, a huge portion of this is just whether or not Trump is going to allow that to happen, because I think that's certainly where the Israelis are going towards. Now, for an example on what that looks like, here we have an example from southern Lebanon, as Omar was pointing out there, with thousands of violations of this alleged ceasefire that's supposedly been in place for months. Here from Dropsite, they say, in southern Lebanon, Israeli troops may no longer occupy towns on foot, but for residents, the war continues overhead and from nearby hilltops. They say drones patrol daily, striking without warning. Snipers stationed on Israeli-held ridges watch roads, rooftops, and fields. They say in September, an Israeli drone strike in Bint Jabil killed 5 civilians, including 3 children, when a missile hit their car. Nearly 100,000 homes across Lebanon have been damaged or destroyed by Israel, mostly in the south. And Amnesty International calls for war crimes investigations over apparently deliberate attacks on civilian properties. They also have Jeremy Lafredo for Dropsite documenting the devastation in Bint Jabil, as well as several other places in southern Lebanon as well, areas still under drone surveillance from Israeli-held hills. And he says, despite the danger, families are rebuilding, with a quote here saying, anything Israel doesn't want to see return, they destroy, said a shopkeeper, and they shoot anyone just to instill fear. So again, this is what the Israeli idea of a ceasefire is, right? It's a one-sided ceasefire where they retain the right to continue firing in whatever ways that they want. So again, a very fragile situation to say the least that we're looking at in Gaza. Now, we also have, again, another thing here from the speech in the Knesset. Now, this is one of, I guess you could call it, the positive things about Donald Trump, is that unlike other presidents and unlike other American politicians, he just says the quiet part out loud over and over again. This is nothing that you would ever hear from an American politician or president other than Donald Trump, just saying this kind of shit as straightforwardly as he does. But here he's talking about Miriam Adelson, who of course was in the crowd in the Knesset when he was giving this speech. And he basically just outlines how the pro-Israel lobby and how pro-Israel Zionists in the United States bribe American politicians to be more pro-Israel. So here he goes. Here from Asa Winstanley, just putting down the bullet points here. Trump boasted about having moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, saying, "Isn't that right, Miriam?" He said, quote, "Look at her sitting there so innocently. She's got $60 billion in the bank." Says of Miriam and late husband, casino mogul Sheldon Adelson, quote, "I think they had more trips to the White House than anybody else." Says that Sheldon Adelson was a very aggressive man, but I loved him. He'd call up, "Can I come over and see you?" I would say, "Sheldon, I'm the president of the United States. It doesn't work that way." And he'd come in, but they were very responsible for so much. He says, "I'm going to get her in trouble with this, but I actually asked her once, I said, 'So Miriam, I know that you love Israel. What do you love more, the United States or Israel?' She refused to answer. That means that might be an issue, I must say." Okay, so so much going on here. First off, to contextualize this, Miriam Adelson is the donor, again, the wife of the late Sheldon Adelson, who was a mega Zionist donor to Republicans and to Donald Trump. Miriam Adelson, I believe, gave Trump over $100 million effectively in sort of a gesture to try to get him to allow Israel to annex the West Bank. And here he is just outlining this, saying that, yeah, Sheldon, I would tell him that he can't come over, and then he would just show up at the White House. And he was very aggressive, and he got pretty much everything that he wanted. And they have, $60 billion in the bank, very wealthy, very influential. And then even at the bottom here, this is something that you could make a case that under the laws that Congress recently passed, that under the standards of anti-Semitism that our own government set into law, that this would be like an anti-Semitic remark against Miriam, because this is the sort of dual loyalty trope that many people say is anti-Semitic for the pro-Israel crowd. Literally saying or implying here that Miriam likes Israel or supports Israel more than she supports the United States of America. And this is somebody who Donald Trump is admitting in this statement that he took millions and millions of dollars for, effectively as a trade for pro-Israel policy. So, just amazing. Just saying everything out loud here. Yes, the pro-Israel crowd has billions and billions of dollars that they can dump into the American political system. They gave me a bunch of money. They were highly influential. I did whatever they wanted. And, she might like Israel more than she even likes the United States. Okay, I guess, again, one of the positives of Donald Trump is that he will just say this kind of shit out loud in public. So you have that. Now, moving on to the hostage stuff that I have for you guys. Here from Ryan Grimm and Dropsite News. So we have Israel supporters furious about CNN's Amanpour apparently saying on air that Israeli captives have probably been treated better than the average Gazan. And they have footage here from many of the Palestinians who have been released, about 1,700 of them that have been released, none of whom were charged with any crime. So keep in mind, as the media keeps framing this as hostages, Israeli hostages exchanged for Palestinian prisoners, these are the prisoners that they're talking about, right? There really is no way that you could define them genuinely as prisoners if they're not given due process, they're not charged with any crimes, or even in the cases where they are charged with crimes, they're usually put through like military tribunals where the conviction rate is 99.9%. There's no way that you can say that Hamas is holding Israeli hostages, but Israel is not holding Palestinian hostages. Not only are they holding hostages, but they're holding, dozens and dozens and dozens of times more hostages than Hamas ever had, right? By the thousands. And many of these 1,700 are people who were captured after October 7th, when Israel just went on a kidnapping spree in both Gaza as well as the West Bank. And again, just took women, children, innocent men, didn't convict them with a crime or anything, just held them as hostages to eventually, be used in this kind of a deal. So 1,700 Palestinian hostages were released from Gaza or from Israeli captivity. And Ryan Grimm points out here, in terms of the horrific treatment that many of them are reporting, he says, if a single Israeli hostage was treated like this for one day, it would be a story that we'd hear for decades. And the quote here from one of these people is, several returning captives told Al Jazeera's Tariq Abu Azoum that they were tortured more than once a day, including electrocuted and shot with rubber-coated bullets. One described a facility where they were held as a slaughterhouse. And we also have some images here of one man literally being shoved off the bus here, because there were busloads truckloads of some of these hostages being released out into the West Bank. And you can see this man is like, it looks like on the verge of death as he's being brought off of this bus with paramedics and aid workers that are having to lift him physically out of the bus. Right? I mean, this is the condition that many of these hostages were held in Israeli captivity. And of course, we've all seen images of before and after of what many Palestinians look like before they go to some of these torture dungeons versus what they look like when they get out. Many of them totally emaciated, reporting torture. There have been tons of reports that I've covered on this channel of some Palestinians even being fully tortured to death in these dungeons in Israel. So absolutely horrific, inhumane treatment that many of these people are reporting that they faced inside of Israeli captivity. Now, we also have this here from Al Jazeera. They say that 154 of those who were freed by Israel, 154 are going to be forced into exile, right? So not given back to Palestinians in Gaza or given back to their families in the West Bank, but just exported to a different country, right? So you had that aspect of it as well. And then finally, we also have this aspect of it, which is actually normal for Israel. This is just one of the psychotic things that I guess has been normalized to the point where many people don't even mention it. But Israel banned Palestinians from celebrating the release of Palestinian hostages and banned their families from giving interviews, right? I mean, think about how this contextualizes the broader picture, the broader structure of power that we're talking about here, that Israel could or would ban these people from celebrating their families that were essentially kidnapped after October 7th. You're not allowed to celebrate their return, and you're not allowed to give news interviews to describe what happened to them or their treatment in these facilities. Right now, again, this isn't the first time that this has happened. This is actually something that they do all the time in order to justify, crackdowns on anybody who dares to disobey and to, celebrate their family being returned to them. But you had that aspect of it as well. Now, a couple more updates here before I finish off this video. We have here from Dropsite News in terms of the aid influx that was supposed to happen as a part of this agreement. Now, keep in mind, the agreement itself said that the aid influx levels would go back to January of this year during the earlier ceasefire at the beginning of the Trump administration that Israel then completely obliterated after phase 1. As they were doing negotiations on phase 2, they blew up the deal. But back then, the amount of aid that was supposed to be getting in was around 600 trucks per day, which is the minimum amount that the United Nations estimates needs to get into Gaza. It's in all likelihood much more than that needs to get in. But according to the Gaza government media office, they said only 173 aid trucks entered the strip on Sunday, the first day after the ceasefire took effect. So keep in mind, we have a huge bulk of the population that has been dealing with stage 5 famine, doing a tiny fraction of what the bare minimum is and on what's needed in Gaza is obviously not going to cut it. So 173 is the number that they're at right now. Now, we also have this, again, in terms of the sort of buzzer-beater war crimes that the Israelis were committing in the aftermath of this deal being announced. So obviously I covered numerous different examples in one of my previous videos a couple of days back on the continued bombing and shelling and shooting of Palestinians after Trump told the Israelis to stop bombing and to stop shooting. And then we also have this, because remember, part of this agreement is that during the hostage exchange, right, once the Israeli captives are sent back to Israel, the IDF is supposed to take a step back, right? And I showed you the lines on the map of where they're being pushed back to. It's really not that much of a difference. They're still going to be occupying Gaza, but they're supposed to pull back to a defined line as a part of this agreement. And as they were doing that pullback, that retreat, the IDF essentially did mass arson attacks on Palestinian homes. So here from Dropsite News on some of that, of course, we can start off here with a picture that was self-posted onto social media. Has been a consistent trend throughout the entirety of this genocide. IDF soldiers posting their war crimes on social media proudly and publicly. You can see 2 of them here sort of holding a gas canister up in the air as there are flames burning behind them with what looks to be like rugs and wood and other things like that, trying to burn this building to the ground. I mean, just amazing that this is a normal thing that we have been seeing for 2 years straight now. I mean, is there any other military on the face of the planet that behaves in this kind of way? I mean, it's completely insane. But some details on this. They say, in the immediate aftermath of Donald Trump's announcement on Thursday that both Hamas and Israel had signed off on an agreement to stop the fighting, the Israeli military launched an arson spree, setting fire to civilian infrastructure, including the destruction of an essential sanitation plant in Gaza City. After publication, the Israeli Defense Forces told Dropsite, quote, "It is aware of the incident and is being reviewed. I'm sure they're going to review it and hold these people accountable." For sure, guys, right? They say the destruction of Palestinian structures following the departure of soldiers who had used them as temporary bases has been the hallmark of Israel's approach to Gaza for 2 years. In July, Israeli reporter Yuval Abraham collected testimonies from soldiers describing a myriad of arson methods. One saying, quote, "Every Arab house we entered had olive oil. We poured the oil on the sofas and on anything flammable in the apartment, and then we ignited it or threw in a smoke grenade. That was a common practice." So again, not the first time that this kind of behavior has been happening inside of Gaza. This is the normal standard practice, apparently, according to the IDF themselves, that, hey, we find some oil, we find some gas, we're just going to pour it on flammable things and burn everything that we come across. They also say that the agreement came after months of a concerted effort to render Gaza uninhabitable by destroying residences and civilian infrastructure, culminating in the ground invasion of Gaza City and the leveling of several high-rises in Gaza City. In September, Israeli government minister Gila Gamliel told Channel 7 News, quote, "We have already completely annihilated 75% of the entire Gaza Strip. There remains 25%, which, as you know, we are now taking over the city of Gaza. There will be nothing left there that would have really have the potential to be habitable." So this is the kind of, again, openly genocidal statement that you get very casually from official Israeli government officials. Now you have, continuing down here, the scope of the arson perpetuated in Gaza City on the night of October 9th and early in the morning of October 10th, Thursday night into Friday, just after the ceasefire was agreed to, but before Israel's cabinet approved it, was broader than at any other time that DropSite has tracked during the assault on the Strip. Its perpetrators were not confined to a single unit, nor was the burning confined to a specific neighborhood. DropSite News identified members of the Israeli army originating from several different brigades, including the Golani, Givati, the Nahal brigades, and the newly formed ultra-Orthodox Hash Monaim brigade, who posted dozens of photos and videos of buildings engulfed in flames during their withdrawal from Gaza City to the yellow line defined in the Trump agreement, again, still within Gaza's territory. And on Sunday, an Israeli soldier from the Kafir brigade posted a photo of himself standing in front of a set of burning wooden pallets, saying on Friday, just before departure, burning food so that it won't reach the Gazans. May their names be erased. May their names be erased. This is the kind of stuff, again, that Israeli soldiers are posting openly. Burning food explicitly in his own words so that it won't be able to reach Palestinians and that they may be erased. I mean, you could have never asked for a more clear genocidal assault than this one, when the soldiers themselves are bragging about it online, on social media, in front of the entire world to see. You have some other pictures that are posted down here. Soldiers in front of the burning biotowers inside of the sewage plant in Gaza. I mean, again, just absolutely annihilating it as they're on their way out. A couple more on that here. They say in social media posts, one soldier can be seen posing in front of the burning water treatment plant, and another captioned the photo of the flames, "One last memory." The plant is operated by the Coastal Municipalities Water Utility, a Palestinian NGO which is managing much of the water and sanitation infrastructure in Gaza. And DropSite News spoke with their director, Monther Shablak, who said the arson fits a clear pattern of Israel's attack on Gaza's water system. So attacking homes, attacking, water system and water treatment plants and food as well, to destroy everything that they possibly could as they were making this withdrawal. I mean, here are some other pictures that DropSite was able to locate. You can see a soldier posting a picture of himself here, smoking a cigarette in front of rows and rows of burning apartment buildings. I mean, other ones here as well. It seems like multiple high-rise buildings, apartments that are lit on fire, soldiers standing by, watching. You can also see some residents who were trying to make their way back and saw the burning pictures in the background. You can see the aftermath of this, just scorched building after scorched building in the background. And again, graffiti on the insides with the Star of David tagged inside to sort of, I guess, mark their war crimes that they're committing in real time. So again, sort of a final, war crime that they could post for the entire world as they're doing this withdrawal. Now, again, keep in mind, they're still inside of Gaza. They just pulled back to a slightly further away line inside of Gaza, but they're still inside. And this is just what they decided to do as they were being told to take a step back, right? Just torching everything that they could get their hands on. We also have here from Haaretz drone footage, as obviously Palestinians are starting to return to the north by the hundreds of thousands right now to, the rubble of what presumably would have been their homes. Drone footage revealing Gaza City's devastation with the United Nations estimating that 83% of the buildings have been damaged or destroyed. Now, while this is the case, I have also seen some videos, incredibly heartwarming and uplifting videos online of Palestinians who do return to their homes that are partially standing, if you want to be generous, and have used the supplies of some of the rubble that they have found surrounding their homes in order to try to rebuild and to make something, some sort of something resembling a normal life for themselves. There have been incredibly, harrowing and uplifting stories of people trying to make do the best that they can in the situation that they're in. But again, hundreds of thousands of people returning to the north to see 83% of the buildings have been damaged or destroyed, and it's over 90% of homes that have been damaged or destroyed at this point. You can see some more images here of what some of the scenes looked like as people returned to Gaza City here. I mean, again, the streets completely swarmed with dust, with debris, with metal, probably with unexploded ordnances as well. You have collapsed buildings, some of them completely flattened, some of them partially flattened, and obviously extremely worrying for anybody who does try to go back into their partially standing apartment or home, that potentially these are structurally unsafe for people to be in right now. And I do pray and hope that they nobody gets killed as a result of a building falling down in on itself as people are trying to go and rebuild with what they can. But again, just absolutely endless scenes of destruction in the north of Gaza in the aftermath of the Israeli ground invasion. So that's what I have for you guys today. I warned you it was going to be a long video, just passing over the 30-minute mark right now. If you made it to the end, appreciate the support. Appreciate you guys watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. We're trying to get our way to 100,000 so that more people can be exposed to this kind of coverage, and we can build up this channel's community and all of that good stuff. But there's your update for today, guys. Again, there's no clear indication of where this is going to go in the next couple of weeks. Donald Trump is staking a lot on this being some sort of a genuine long-term peace agreement. You have the Israelis, who I think by no means agree with that sentiment or want this to be a lasting peace, and will be looking at every opportunity that they can and chomping at the bit in order to make sure that this agreement falls apart. I'm sure that they'll be looking for lines that they can use to try to pin that on Hamas in some way, even though they've agreed to the deal that is not favorable to them in really many ways at all. And so yeah, I'll keep you guys updated over the next couple of days and weeks here as we see how exactly this is going to play out.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying